Like, I didn't kill her physically, but in the back of my mind, she died. And I didn't even cry, not a single tear.
I'm more comfortable with expressing myself and connecting with people in a way that I feel is speaking without singing. Romantic Homicide and Here With Me is like anybody could have made those songs.
David, caught on camera reacting to his girlfriend's death inside his car, has turned into one of the most disturbing internet clips in years. What looked like another viral moment at first spiraled into chaos when investigators pulled her body from his abandoned Tesla, flipping the whole narrative on its head. Now, with federal agents piecing evidence together, people are whispering that this one clip could be the key that locks him up for life. This ain't just gossip, this is the streets talking, and the streets don't lie. David, the Houston kid who came out of nowhere with the 2022 hit Romantic Homicide, had the world singing his pain like it was poetry. But now folks are wondering if he was really spelling out his darkest secrets in plain sight. Was it just art? Or was he foreshadowing a real-life tragedy that played out in his own ride? The victim, 15-year-old Latina girl, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, from Lake Elsinore, a quiet suburb where everyone knows everybody until one secret blows the lid off everything. Her name is now etched into the scandal forever, and the silence from her circle only fuels the wild theories. People are asking, was she just collateral in David's twisted rise or something way more sinister? And here's where it cuts even deeper. David Anthony Burke, his government name, didn't come through the polished label machine. He wasn't some church-trained voice being groomed for stardom. He was raw, self-made, and straight from the internet era. That independence made him a star, but it might also be the very thing dragging him into the darkest spotlight imaginable. Forget talent shows. David didn't climb through no shiny industry pipeline. This dude rose out the digital trenches like a ghost with a mic, armed with nothing but an iPhone and his sister's closet flipped into a studio. That gritty DIY grind made him relatable to a whole generation, and that's exactly why kids crowned him real. Romantic Homicide wasn't polished pop, it was raw bedroom confessions, straight pain on wax. But here's the twist. When you build your empire on being the most authentic voice for broken-hearted teenagers, there's a thin line between art and evidence. And now, looking back, it's like David blurred that line on purpose. His mysterious loner image wasn't just branding. It may have been the perfect mask to hide something darker. While millions of fans streamed his heartbreak like therapy, some now believe he was grooming an audience to disguise his own sinister reality. It hits harder when you rewind his interviews. On the Zach Sang Show, David broke down how he created those tracks, sounding like just another artsy kid. But with hindsight, those words send chills. He shrugged off his violent lyrics as if everybody could relate, brushing them off like casual poetry. But who else ends up with a teenage girl's body decomposing in their Tesla? That ain't art. That's something else entirely.
It's all of them. I try to include a piece of myself in every part of the music, but I try to get like every different perspective I can, every possible perspective, every possible like viewpoint.
And that's the dangerous part. He weaponized authenticity. He knew the more he leaned into pain, the more kids would cling to him. Instead of just being a voice for the misunderstood, he may have been hiding his darkest truths in plain sight while the world mistook it for genius. While David was out here selling the image of a soft-spoken artist who got teenage heartbreak, behind the scenes he was running something way darker, a hunting ground dressed up as a fan community. His Discord servers weren't just chat rooms, they were digital trap houses, built to lure in vulnerable girls who thought they'd found a safe place to share their pain. Instead, they walked straight into the grip of someone who knew exactly how to twist that pain into power. The blueprint was cold but calculated. David didn't act like a superstar on a pedestal. He slid in like the big brother figure, the one who had been through the same storms. He offered sympathy, advice, those comforting words lonely teens are desperate to hear. But every chat, every DM wasn't just kindness, it was research. He was studying their weaknesses like a coach building plays, learning exactly where to strike when trust was at its highest. Look at the numbers. His main fan base wasn't grown adults or streetwise hustlers. It was girls 13 to 17, kids already drowning in depression, family chaos, and the awkward storms of suburban life. They weren't built to spot manipulation. They thought the internet was safe. They thought an artist who wrote sad songs and seemed sensitive couldn't possibly be dangerous. That's what made it so easy for him to move. Then came the SHH tattoo, his creepy signature. To fans, it looked like some deep artsy symbol, a way to honor his music, but in reality, it became his mark, a twisted way to brand loyalty while teaching these girls to keep quiet. All across the country, teens were inking themselves, thinking they were repping their favorite artist, when really they were advertising their silence to a predator who trained them to never speak out. David's social media wasn't random, it was strategy. He knew the exact time to strike, late nights when lonely kids were scrolling half asleep, vulnerable, and desperate to feel seen. That's when he dropped cryptic captions about being misunderstood, behind-the-scenes clips that made fans feel like insiders, and rare replies that made random followers feel chosen. It was a psychological trap dressed up as fan engagement, and it worked. None of this was accidental, it was a blueprint for manipulation. His pages looked like artistic havens, but in reality, they were hunting grounds in plain sight. Every dark lyric, every eerie visual of women dead in his music videos, every cryptic post dripping with despair, it could all be brushed off as art. And anytime someone dared to question if that was appropriate for a teenage fan base, defenders swooped in with the same excuse. You just don't understand real artistry. That shield of creativity gave him the perfect cover. And then, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Let's keep it real. She wasn't some clueless kid. She was sharp, ambitious, and artistic to her core. A 15-year-old with dreams way bigger than what her small-town streets could hold. Born September 7, 2009, to a tight-knit Latino family in Lake Elsinore, she stood about 5 feet 1 inch, 120 pounds, with wavy brown hair and deep brown eyes that carried fire. She had the kind of presence that made people believe she was destined for more than suburban California could offer. But even the brightest stars can get caught slipping when predators dress themselves up like Prince Charming. Social media made the mask easy. He didn't have to chase victims in the streets when he could slide through screens, offering attention, validation, and fake protection. That's how even a smart, creative girl like Celeste, who should have been safe in her suburban bubble, got pulled into something she could never escape. Celeste's whole vibe was pure Gen Z, TikTok trends, creative spirit, and that infamous red ink SHH tattoo on her right index finger. She wore it like a badge of loyalty, not knowing it was the same symbol David used to mark silence. To neighbors, she was outgoing, magnetic, full of life. But beneath that shine was a softness, a vulnerability predators know how to sniff out. That mix made her the kind of kid everybody noticed, but also the kind of soul somebody dangerous could target. She wasn't just another suburban teenager scrolling her phone for fun. Celeste was gifted. Teachers remembered her as the girl who turned in stories so deep, so emotionally layered, it was like reading the work of someone twice her age. That artistic sensitivity made her special, but it also made her the perfect mark for someone who knew how to weaponize trust and empathy. She wanted guidance, mentorship, a figure who understood her world, and David's whole persona was built to exploit kids just like her. That SHH tattoo kept popping up in her posts, sometimes front and center, other times hidden in her sketches or selfies. To family, it looked like harmless rebellion, a quirky teenage detail. But later, investigators saw it for what it was, a breadcrumb trail, evidence of a secret link to David. What seemed like art was really a coded allegiance to someone far more dangerous. And then came the change, the shift that friends couldn't ignore. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Celeste grew more secretive online. She guarded her phone like treasure, deflected questions about who she was talking to, and brushed off concern with excuses. That wasn't just normal teenage privacy, it was a sign she was slipping deeper into something she couldn't explain out loud. Looking back, the red flags were there. But to parents, teachers, and neighbors, it all blended in with normal teenage behavior. More time glued to her phone, staying up late, mood swings tied to texts. It seemed harmless on the surface, but those little changes were the exact cracks predators look for. The cracks David knew how to widen until she was cut off from reality. Celeste's best friend, who begged to stay anonymous because David's fans have been sending death threats, painted the chilling picture. She said Celeste went from being open about her crushes and silly teenage flings to locking everything down. Suddenly, she was obsessed with her messages, interrupting hangouts just to check her phone like it was life or death. That urgency wasn't teenage drama, it was control. And when anyone pushed her to explain who she was always texting, she'd snap, deflect, and shut down the convo completely. So unlike her usual open vibe. The mood swings were the scariest part. Friends remembered her lighting up after certain messages, giddy, euphoric, only to crash when the replies slowed down or her phone died. Her highs and lows were tied directly to whoever was on the other end of that screen. At home, her family heard her typing deep into the night, long after she should have been sleeping, carrying on secret conversations that no one could track. In the final weeks, it escalated fast. She pulled away from her friends, canceled plans, stopped caring about the things she used to love. She started dropping strange hints, talking about being meant for something bigger and wanting to start fresh. Those weren't her words, they were promises someone was feeding her. Ideas planted to make her believe she had a destiny beyond her small-town world. And then the most chilling detail, her mother, Maria Hernandez, revealed that Celeste quietly mentioned she was dating someone named David. But every time her mom pressed for details, Celeste shut it down. That secrecy wasn't just teenage privacy, it was a red flag waving right in everyone's face. Every time the family tried to dig into this mystery boyfriend, they hit a wall. And in a tight-knit suburb where teen romances were usually an open secret, that silence should have been a blazing red flag. Parents knew each other, kids talked, rumors spread fast, but with Celeste, the details stayed locked down, hidden in shadows. April 5th, 2024 started out looking like any other day for the Hernandez family. Celeste seemed hyped for her usual movie night with her older brother Matthew, a tradition they'd kept alive since middle school. She got ready with unusual care, choosing an outfit that told its own story. Gray pants, a black sweater, a simple hat, and Hello Kitty sandals. It was half teenage sophistication, half playful kid, and it showed exactly where she was in life, caught between childhood dreams and adult expectations. Matthew pulled up right on time, 7 p.m. sharp, ready for his sister's usual chatter about being hungry or her excitement over the horror flick they had lined up. But instead of Celeste waiting at their spot, he found an empty park. Her phone, straight to voicemail with every call. The silence was instant dread. The kind of silence that doesn't make sense when you know the person you're calling never misses. The timeline that night still haunts the family. Around 6 p.m., Celeste posted a bright selfie with the caption, "Movie night with my bro," a snapshot of her final known moments. But in the small gap between that post and her brother arriving at 7 o'clock, everything changed. She never made it to that meeting. Somewhere in that missing hour, her path veered into danger. At first, people tried to explain it away. Maybe she lost track of time. Maybe she got distracted. Maybe something harmless came up. But as minutes turned to hours, the unanswered calls piled up and her absence stretched on. Worry turned into terror. By the end of the night, the Hernandez household wasn't just concerned, they were panicking, sensing that something unthinkable had already happened. Maria Hernandez's instincts kicked in the second Celeste didn't show. This wasn't a runaway, this was danger. That very night, the search began, and it didn't stop for over 16 agonizing months. The family plastered flyers all over Lake Elsinore, organized community search parties, and blasted Celeste's face across social media, begging anyone with info to help. The entire town felt the weight, but nothing could prepare them for the truth that would come later. Because while the Hernandez family searched day and night, Celeste was already gone. Her body locked inside the car of the same artist whose songs had soundtracked her last months alive. The cruel irony was unbearable. All that time, her parents were begging for leads. The answer was sitting in plain sight, tied to the name David Anthony Burke. Celeste's disappearance also cracked open ugly truths about how law enforcement treats missing teenagers, especially working-class Latino kids in suburban towns. From the start, cops stamped her as a runaway instead of treating it like a potential abduction. That label cost crucial time and exposed a bias that too many families know too well. Yes, statistics show that most missing teens eventually return home, but that wait-and-see approach ignores the very real dangers that predators pose in the digital age. And in Celeste's case, that delay was devastating. The most haunting part? Maria had told people months before the discovery that Celeste was dating someone named David. Back then, it sounded like normal teenage secrecy. A boyfriend parents hadn't met yet? Nothing unusual for a 15-year-old. But once her decomposed body was pulled from that Tesla registered to David Burke, the weight of that name hit like a knife. What once seemed like harmless young love now stood as a chilling warning everyone had missed. The timing, the secrecy, the mood swings, it all snapped into place in the worst way imaginable. By September 2025, over 16 long months since Celeste vanished, her case had cooled in the public eye. The Hernandez family never stopped fighting, clinging to hope, but the media had already moved on to fresher headlines. And then, out of nowhere, came the discovery that flipped the internet upside down, turning a cold case into one of the most shocking celebrity scandals in recent memory. September 8th, 2025, just another day at Hollywood Toe on North Mansfield Avenue, until workers caught a whiff that made their stomachs turn. That unmistakable stench of death was leaking out of a black Tesla Model 3, abandoned for weeks under the brutal LA sun. At first, nobody thought twice. Expensive cars end up in tow lots all the time. Breakdowns, repos, spoiled rich kids ditching daddy's ride. It was nothing new. But this wasn't just another Tesla gathering dust. This one carried a nightmare inside. When LAPD rolled up and forced the trunk open, what they saw was pure horror. Inside, wrapped in black plastic, was a human body so far gone it barely weighed 71 pounds, less than half of what 15-year-old Celeste had weighed when she disappeared. The smell, the sight, the silence, it froze everyone in place. This wasn't just evidence. It was confirmation that the missing girl was never coming home. The level of decay told investigators the chilling truth. Celeste had likely been killed right around the time she vanished in April 2024. All those months of searching, posting flyers, begging for answers, her body had been rotting in the very car registered to David Anthony Burke. The same young artist millions of kids had been idolizing was now at the center of a crime scene straight out of a horror film. Even after 16 months of brutal decomposition, certain details survived and they were enough to blow the case wide open. The clothing was a perfect match to what Celeste wore the night she vanished. The white tube top, the black leggings, the yellow chain bracelet, and the stud earrings. And then came the detail that made everyone's blood run cold. Still visible on what was left of her right index finger was the red ink SH tattoo, the same mark that had become her chilling signature. The registration papers sealed the nightmare. This wasn't just any abandoned Tesla. It belonged to David Anthony Burke, better known simply as David, the R&B sensation whose viral hit Romantic Homicide had been blasting in cars, schools, and bedrooms across America for years. Overnight, the name that symbolized teenage heartbreak became tied to one of the darkest scandals in modern music history. For Maria Hernandez, the phone call from investigators was every parent's worst nightmare. And yet, it was the moment she had both feared and secretly prayed for. After 16 months of silence, dead ends, and sleepless nights, she finally had an answer, even if it was the most devastating truth imaginable. "I knew it was my baby," Maria told reporters, her voice cracking. The description matched everything. Her hope for a miracle was gone, replaced by grief that would never leave. The identification was carried out with extreme care, given how fragile the remains were. Dental records gave the first confirmation, backed by DNA analysis and, hauntingly, that distinct tattoo. But what truly shattered the family was the yellow chain bracelet, Matthew's birthday gift to his little sister, still clinging to her decomposed wrist. That single piece of jewelry carried all the weight of love, memory, and loss, confirming what the family already knew deep in their gut. Celeste was gone, and the truth was finally undeniable. Matthew's reaction cut deep, because this wasn't just a crime, it was a nightmare tied to a global celebrity. "She was on her way to see a movie with me, but never came back. We knew she knew David, but this," he told reporters, his voice shaking with disbelief. "To realize your little sister's death was connected to an artist millions were streaming, it was too surreal, almost impossible to process." Once the news broke that Celeste's remains were found in David's Tesla, his team moved at lightning speed to clean up the image. Lawyers dropped stacks of tour schedules, flight records, and hotel receipts to prove he wasn't even in LA when the body was discovered. On paper, it checked out. At the time investigators forced that trunk open, David was in Minneapolis on his Withered World tour, with his next stop scheduled in Seattle. But here's the catch. Those receipts only covered the moment of discovery. They didn't explain when the body was actually placed in that car. Did David stash it months earlier? Did someone close to him do it with his help? Those questions couldn't be erased with paperwork. His management pushed a polished statement stressing full cooperation, but it read like damage control, carefully worded to sound helpful while dodging any admission of guilt. David's personal reaction, though, was chaos. Instead of a clear denial, he dropped a cryptic post with the number 67 that sent his fans into a frenzy, arguing, decoding, spinning theories all night long. And then nothing. He ghosted every platform, vanishing into silence right when the world demanded answers. That split, the professional team smiling for the cameras while the man himself cracked under pressure, spoke volumes. The fallout was instant. His Seattle show was canceled within hours, citing unforeseen circumstances. But everyone knew the truth. He was radioactive. Within 48 hours, the industry turned on him. Crocs yanked their collab campaigns, Hollister pulled his ads, and streaming platforms began slapping warnings across his tracks. The same companies that built him up were now erasing him, desperate to avoid being dragged into the storm. The second David's name got tied to Celeste's murder, the internet morphed into the biggest crime lab on earth. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, millions of amateur detectives dove in like bloodhounds, pulling apart every lyric, every post, every music video. It was a digital battleground, half legit investigation, half conspiracy circus, and the timing alone was enough to make people lose their minds. Here's the detail that sent shockwaves. David dropped the romantic homicide music video on September 7th, 2022, Celeste's 13th birthday. And in that video, his character, blindfolded, shoots an on-screen girlfriend, then cradles her body in the rain. What once looked like artsy heartbreak visuals now played like a twisted prophecy. The internet ran wild, frame by frame, dissecting every second, convinced he had mapped out his crime years before it even happened. And it didn't stop there. Fans swore the actress in the video looked eerily like Celeste. Same hair texture, similar build, even facial features that felt too close to coincidence. Add to that the way the girlfriend's body was staged in the rain, limp, positioned, emotionless, an uncanny echo of how investigators believed Celeste's body had been concealed. The parallels were so exact, they gave people chills. But the real gasoline on this fire came from the alleged Discord leaks and the mysterious track titled Celeste that suddenly popped up online. Screenshots of supposed chats between David and a user named Celeste spread like wildfire, with timestamps dating back to 2022 when she was just 12 years old. The messages painted a chilling picture of grooming, sympathy laced with control, validation mixed with manipulation. Nobody could fully verify the receipts, but the internet didn't care. The screenshots alone were enough to convince millions that David had been laying out his moves in real time. The alleged Discord leaks painted a chilling playbook, David sliding in as the understanding mentor, slowly cutting Celeste off from her circle, pushing secrecy about their chats, then turning the conversations toward darker, more inappropriate territory. It was a predator's script disguised as compassion, and once the pieces got exposed, the pattern looked impossible to ignore. Then came the leaked demo, Celeste, allegedly recorded in December 2023, just months before she disappeared. The track supposedly carried lyrics about innocence lost and a girl who slipped away. But the line that sent shivers across social media was one referencing red ink promises that can't be broken. Fans instantly tied it to the infamous SHH tattoo, red ink, right index finger, the exact same spot David and Celeste both marked. That tattoo became the most debated smoking gun in the entire case. Both of them inked with the same design, same finger, same color. It felt like a bond too exact to be coincidence. Supporters of David tried to push back, pointing out other celebs who'd rocked similar tattoos. Names like Rihanna and Lindsay Lohan got thrown into the mix. To them, it was just a trendy design that got way too much attention once tragedy hit. But the discovery of Celeste's body flipped everything. David's entire discography, the lyrics, the visuals, the cryptic posts, was no longer just music, it was evidence. Every bar sounded like foreshadowing, every video frame looked like a clue, every caption read like a hidden confession. The same songs that made him a star were now being reread as a roadmap to real-life violence, and millions of fans weren't sure if they'd been listening to heartbreak or horror the entire time. Romantic homicide became the smoking gun in the court of public opinion. Lyrics like, "In the back of my mind, you died and I didn't even cry. No, not a single tear," suddenly stopped reading like poetic heartbreak and started sounding like a straight-up confession. What fans once took as metaphors for numbness after breakups now felt like David spelling out the truth in plain sight, and that reframe shook the entire music industry. Critics pointed out the terrifying irony. His biggest hit, the track that catapulted him into fame, had been powered by millions of listeners who thought they were connecting to sad boy vulnerability. But if those lyrics weren't fiction, if they were literal descriptions of murder, then his entire artistry was tainted. The blurred line between performance and reality suddenly collapsed, and people were left wondering if they had been streaming evidence of a crime all along. And then came the interview receipts. In his early Zach Sang Show appearance, David explained his creative process with a calmness that now feels sinister. Back then, he sounded like an artist wise beyond his years, talking about building cinematic universes with antagonists and protagonists. But in the shadow of Celeste's death, those words twisted into something darker. Was he really just role-playing, or was he pulling straight from his own reality?
But the 4 is like, I replaced the A with it, took out the I. And the 4 is like an ongoing D4vd lore. Like it's 4 universes with all these different characters.
Oh, interesting.
I'm building out this like cinematic universe. In the future is gonna be like a whole bunch of different stuff. I can't spoil too much now, but it's like, I got this blindfold character that you see in my music videos. That's gonna expand into like these different antagonists and protagonists and like a whole anime thing. It's gonna be crazy, it's gonna be crazy.
What once seemed like maturity and depth now raised chilling questions. How much of his art was fiction, and how much was confession? Critics began arguing that David had weaponized his artistic persona as a mask, using the cover of creativity to blueprint real violence. The blindfolded character that popped up again and again in his visuals didn't look so symbolic anymore. People started seeing it as his way of showing how he could hide in plain sight, unseen, while committing acts he didn't want the world to connect back to him. The fallout split communities right down the middle. In hip-hop and urban spaces, some voices claimed this was just another young black artist being railroaded by a system quick to paint success as criminality. They warned that society had always been eager to see the worst in rising black men, and this case looked like history repeating itself. But others pushed back hard, saying the evidence was far too heavy to dismiss, and that shielding predators in the name of solidarity only puts more young women at risk. The debate got loud, messy, and emotional. Then came the bigger cultural clash, the role of art itself in criminal cases. Hip-hop has always carried the weight of lyrics being twisted into evidence, with prosecutors trying to turn bars into confessions. To some, the David case was a dangerous precedent in the making, threatening to weaponize every violent lyric against black artists in court. But to others, it wasn't about music. It was about accountability. And if the songs, the videos, the posts all lined up with real-world crimes, then calling it art wasn't enough to wash away the blood. The counter-argument hit just as hard. When your art doesn't just resemble a crime but mirrors it detail for detail, it stops being performance and starts looking like evidence. When lyrics play out exactly like a real murder, when music videos rehearse the same images investigators later uncover, that's not just artistic expression anymore. That's a blueprint for violence hiding in plain sight. The generational split was glaring. Older hip-hop heads raised in an era where rap was understood as storytelling and characters were quicker to separate the art from the accusations. To them, fiction was always part of the culture. But younger fans, especially David's base, saw their favorite artists as authentic, raw voices of truth and emotion. And when authenticity is the brand, every lyric feels personal. So they took the allegations like a direct attack on their identity. That loyalty twisted into something darker. Hardcore supporters launched harassment campaigns against anyone questioning David's innocence. Journalists covering the case got swarmed with death threats. Internet sleuths sharing evidence were doxxed and targeted. Even Celeste's grieving family members, just fighting for justice, were hit with online abuse from stans who refused to believe their idol could be guilty. But beyond David himself, this case opened a much bigger wound. How hip-hop and social media culture handles the safety of young fans, especially young women. The industry has a long, ugly history of failing to protect them. R. Kelly wasn't an isolated scandal, just the most infamous one. Countless other cases got buried, ignored, or laughed off. Now, in the digital age, predators don't just have fame and power. They have direct access to kids through DMs, Discord servers, and fan communities designed to disarm them. Whether David's music turns out to be prophecy, confession, or just a twisted coincidence, one thing can't be debated. Celeste Rivas Hernandez deserved way more than the fate she suffered. And her story is a reminder that art should never become a shield for exploitation. Now the world waits to see if David will ever face a jury, or if his carefully built image, legal machine, and loyal fan army will keep him shielded from full accountability. Prosecutors are already lining up lyrics, videos, and digital footprints as evidence, while defenders scream that hip-hop is on trial, not just one man. The question hangs heavy. Was David a misunderstood artist or a predator hiding in plain sight? The tragedy of Celeste Rivas Hernandez is bigger than just one case. It's about how easily young women can be lured, how quickly families can be silenced, and how often the music industry turns a blind eye until it's too late. This isn't just about a missing teenager, it's about an entire culture that's still figuring out how to protect its most vulnerable while holding its idols accountable. Whether you believe David's music was a confession, a coincidence, or a calculated mask, the one undeniable fact is this: Celeste deserved better. And the scars left by this case will haunt both her community and the music world for years to come. This story is still unraveling, and you already know, we're keeping it locked right here. For every twist, every leak, every shocking update on David's downfall, make sure you're tapped into BarzBuzz, where the streets get the story first and raw.